To talk about the comp exam, which, as you know, is going to be this week, or this month. It's going to be tomorrow. No, it's the 28th, as I'm sure you all know. And we're trying to get our technology started, so we'll get into some of that in a minute. But let me just start off by just hearing from you. What have you heard about the exam? What rumors have you heard? And what bits of advice, helpful or unhelpful, have you heard? And we'll try to maybe settle on. Yeah.
Just be conscious of the time, obviously, and if you get stuck to move on and you have time to support evidence to back up what you argue or what you're trying to convey, to just move on is what I was told by someone who's
Okay. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. If you get stuck trying to find supportive evidence, don't get too hung up trying to work something out at that moment in time. Taking a little break from a problem that you're stuck in and working on something that's easier to work on the exam is actually pretty good. Other things? Yes?
I heard that the most useful thing you can do is just to be very organized before heading into
Yeah, that's right. So what I would do, if you haven't already done it, is go find your 211 materials, put them all in a folder, make it neat and easy to find stuff, and all that stuff about like study designs, like Campbell and Stanley, X's and O's, and all that kind of stuff. Have it all ready. So put in like tabs, if you need to help yourself find stuff or organize it in folders, but have all that stuff ready to go. The other thing in terms of organization is to get your people organized. And what I mean by that is like, if you have family members that you're having to take care of, you have somebody else take care of those family members for you, you set your schedule up so you really have no other obligations. I know this seems pretty obvious, but I think it's important to do that, especially also for those of you that are working if you haven't already contacted your employers, to try to make sure that your work schedule for that whole period is clear. Are we good? Any other things? I'm just going to close. Okay, so this exam, it's really there to reinforce the ideas and content that you learned from your first year, 211 primarily, but also some stuff from 210, as well as from your EPI classes and all those other classes. It's a chance for you to integrate all of that material into one place. This is in part related to what the accreditation schools would like to see, that you come out, you're ready to go, and that you're well prepared and well trained. Okay? And of course, it's an exam, so it's also an opportunity to evaluate and master your material. Majority of people pass, so I'm really not that worried for you guys. I think it's like, I don't know what the rates are, but it's probably close to 95, 99% that pass. Okay. Now, as you probably know, it is broken into two parts: the article critique as well as a program plan to develop. Okay? So the article critique is roughly 2 pages. So you're going to get something like 3 or 4 articles. What I would advise you to do is to take those articles, read all of them. Okay? Maybe skim them really quickly just to get a feel, but read all of them before you select one, because what you don't want to do is just kind of take one, pick it, go with it, and then as you've written, you're 2 hours into it, you realize, I don't really know what's going on here. So I would pick articles that are easy for you to read and comprehend. What means easy is going to depend a lot on you and your background. We generally try to pick articles that span a variety of interest areas. So, for example, we won't have 4 articles on, teen pregnancy, for example. We try to spread stuff out, so we might have something on obesity, something on seatbelts, something else on depression, stuff like that. Okay? So pick stuff, look through all the articles before you really kind of decide. Once you get it, then go crazy, highlight stuff from the article. Pay attention to things like the study design. Don't get too hung up over things like the statistical analysis, but get a good feel for things that if you imagine yourself going back to 211 and trying to think about objectives and theory and all that kind of stuff, is it all there in the article? Yeah.
So is the format for that part going to be similar to the way, to the examination we had in 211 article critique, where there's just a series of questions about the article, and you're like,
It's open. There's not a series of questions.
there's not a series.
No. So go look at the article, evaluate it yourself. And I think I have a couple of comments about the critique for you. And I'll go, since you're asking back and forth. So one thing you want to do in the critique is look for some kind of theory or model. Are they using Creasy-Procy, health belief model, something like that? What have they done? And if the article has no theory whatsoever, that could be something you would critique. Now, if the article has a theory, you want to see is the theory appropriate, and that they actually use the theory in developing the intervention. Right? So if the intervention is all about the health belief model, then you want to see if they measured stuff like beliefs and barriers and all that good stuff. Right? So is there a framework? Is there a model? Another thing that you might want to evaluate is whether the arguments make any sense at all. Sometimes people just have no sense of logic when they put something together and somehow they're able to publish it. You'd be surprised at some of the junk that gets published. And I say this as a journalist, so pay attention to see if what they are arguing makes sense. To give you an example, if somebody is saying something like, this is all about reducing health disparities, health inequalities, we're going to close the gap between these groups. And you look at their intervention, and their intervention has nothing to do with disparities. And you might say, well, it doesn't really make sense. There's not a strong logical flow across the sections. Yeah.
So the articles when they're chosen, they don't necessarily, like, nothing for these days.
We are selecting articles that are published in the literature that are relevant to the material of 211. The vast majority of articles can be interventions, but it's not guaranteed that all the articles will be interventions.
So it's possible that one of the articles could be like an analysis, or
In theory, yes. In practice, probably not. So, all right, so check for logic and consistency in the article. Does it give us enough background for you to understand what's important? Right? So if you think about 211, right, you have to spend a lot of time looking at baseline data and stuff like that. Well, you should demand the same from the articles. That they give you information to understand the problem, the population, the setting, and all that good stuff. Okay. Then, oops. You can also evaluate the methods part of the article. So the study design. So it could be an experimental design, a randomized controlled clinical trial. It could be a quasi-experimental design of sorts. It could be just a one-shot, pre-post maybe kind of design to try to identify the study design. Most of the time, the authors are explicit, but sometimes they're not. And if they're not explicit, you've got to figure that out. Okay. And from the study design, then you can think about the weaknesses, right? They did not include a comparison group. Well, what are the implications of not including a comparison group? Okay. So say that a potential weakness is that there's no comparison group, and then tell us why that's a weakness. You can also critique the sample. It's a convenient sample done through snowball sampling. Well, what are the limitations of new samples? Right? It's not generalizable. Okay. You can also critique the measures. So if, for example, the study is all about framed as maybe like the health belief model and there are no measures of beliefs, you'd be like, duh, what's going on here? How can you use the health belief model without measuring beliefs? Right? Or if they use proxies. So if the study is about, I don't know, economic factors, and people are saying, well, we're really concerned about differences, we're reducing inequalities based on groups that are poor and not poor, and then they say something silly like, we are going to operationalize wealth by race. So they're going to use race as a proxy for wealth. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And so you can critique stuff like that as well in the measures. And of course, there's stuff about generalizability. Don't go crazy on the statistical analysis. Some of those things might be beyond your background, and we are not evaluating you on your statistical finesse. You should know sort of generally what p-values and stuff are. But if people are using treated on treatment, treated designs and stuff like that, you don't have to go, don't kill yourself trying to figure that out. Okay. And one thing that happens is most research articles have a limitation section in the back, right? Caveats. Okay. Don't just rewrite that. Okay. Don't just say, oh, here's the caveats paragraph. I'm just going to retype it. Don't do that. Okay. That will make people kind of look at you and say, you're not really thinking about the project. So if you're wise, I would look at that and say, yeah, okay, some of these things I might repeat, say it in a different way, maybe expand on what the author said, but also based on your read of the article, you will probably see other things that are limitations of the article that the authors themselves do not acknowledge. And if you can do that, it will probably impress your readers even more because it shows that you're properly engaged with the story. And also, as you critique your articles, don't just list stuff. Don't just throw it out there and assume that it's obvious as to why something is a strength or a weakness. So here's an example. You could say, well, the study didn't include a control group, and you're done. That's not really good enough. Tell us why leaving out a control group is a weakness, right? So you might say something like the lack of a control group meant that the study could not rule out that external events could impact the intervention group. And so, for example, the feds rolled out a new nutrition guidelines program at the same time the intervention happened. So any changes we see amongst this intervention sample might be due to the federal intervention rather than our program per se. That's why we have control groups, right? We can look out historical scans. So take it the next step, don't just list, explain. Okay, so any questions about the critique before we move on? Yes? Well, give me an example of how you would use CRT in that sense.
So, like, if the article didn't include any total contact information, or if they use breaks for your proxy, or they talk about how considering just considering to other groups instead of like a whole, things like that.
Okay. So there's probably 3 people in the department who are familiar with critical race theory. Most of the people in the department are clueless about what CRT is. Chances of somebody who is familiar with CRT evaluating your exam is low. Does that make sense? So I would use the CRT ideas to look at your program, but don't assume that your readers have any knowledge about that, nor do they have consistent values with CRT. Yes?
Quoting from our classes and articles read like helpfully
well, in the critique, we should focus on the article that is in front of you. And if there are ideas from your classes that are relevant to the site, then go ahead and do that. But you don't have to quote per se. Other questions? So I focus a lot on the negatives, but also there are things about the study that they might have done really well, and you can put those things out. Usually pointing out things that are positive on some part. That's usually not where people have issues. It's usually the kind of negative stuff that people seem to struggle with. And the main issue there is not explaining why something is a problem.
What is the percentage of how much should not pay? For example, 20%.
There's no percentage. Some articles are really some articles have way more strengths than negative. Some articles are like just a hot mess. And so there's no right percentage. Okay. But you do want to have some of both in your critique. Okay. I cannot think of any article published in any journal where they have no limitations, no problem. Even articles published in medicine or science all have problems.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to go over this, but is there a way
About two, give or take. That's not our part, but that's a general recommendation about it. Yeah. So follow the directions that are on the exam that are given to you. Okay, so because I have imperfect memory, I think it's double spaced. I don't have the exam in front of me, so yeah. So in case I misspeak about something like double spacing, the exam is your is what you have to answer to. Any other questions?
So let's take an article and you feel it's good at, and maybe you're not basing your basis on the price period, but like, for example, last year, you read about it, based on what's ineffective, it's problematic for a lot of people. And saying, well, the readers value the you can still base that on that, this is problematic, this is not work, and then kind of argue that way, your staff.
You definitely want to go fast. So whatever is written in on the paper, on the manuscript, if something seems wrong, you can call it out. Other questions? So let me talk a little bit more about, we'll talk about the intervention part, and then we'll come back to more general tips. Okay. All right. Okay. So the bulk of the exam, about 10 pages or so, is going to be essentially sort of another kind of look at 211, right? So you're going to develop a program that is inspired by the article that you're critiquing. So take some aspects of the article. You could maybe borrow, oh, they had a really cool intervention idea. You know, this is an intervention where they're using Twitter as a way to reach youth and have immediate communications. Or this is a program where they're doing all this amazing, training on showing children a new way to see the world, something like that. And that could be the intervention. You could say, wow, it's a great application to children. I want to tweak it and maybe apply it to adults or to senior citizens. So use it as an inspiration. Okay?
Sorry.
Yes.
So the program, I don't know if I might miss a big part here. The program is based on the article we chose to complete,
Yeah. So you will create a program
right?
and use the article that you critique to inspire the development of your program. So as the example, like the whole Twitter thing that I kind of mentioned, you could say, well, they did this Twitter program, and we're inspired to do it, and we're going to use Facebook, a different medium, or we're going to apply it to a different population. We will still use Twitter, or instead of using Twitter, the idea of Twitter is to have immediate contact, and maybe we'll do it through text messaging or something like that.
So you can't critique one article and base your program on one of the other articles that we got. If, for example, one of the other articles is more a type of program that kind of resonates with you more, but the article that you chose to critique was one that
You could,
you could.
but it's more work for you. You could, but you got to make it clear. It's kind of a risky strategy if you choose to do that. Yes.
is like how many individuals are sufficient
How many what?
Like languages between, like is one enough? Maybe it's two.
You want to demonstrate, well, there's no number, okay? Because all the articles are different, your ideas are different. You need to show that there's some kind of connection between what you're developing there. But there's no number.
Like if you use the same population, is that what you're saying?
It could be.
So it doesn't just have to be design.
It could be other parts. You have design, you have population, you have theory, you have the intervention per se. There's a lot of different things. Their setup, how they argue it, there's a whole lot of different ways that you can draw on the articles. And I don't want to give you a number because if I gave you a number, it would be wrong. Now you say 3, but somebody could have a successful exam with 1. Somebody else could have a successful exam with 10. So.
You're not, so let's say the articles addressing obesity. That's not the health problem that you're looking at in your program. It's just you're taking parts of it that you thought is kind of, you found inspiration though in it.
Yeah.
Putting it into your program.
Exactly.
Got it.
So this is a program designed to combat obesity. We're instead going to use it to combat smoking.
Got it. Okay. So you get to select which problem.
Yeah. So you have a lot of flexibility, and that's part of the thing. I mean, I'm basically saying in several different ways, right?
I think our ability is actually that people tend to choose articles that are aligned with their interests already, so their intervention, their program is based on the same kind of ideas that we do with their programs and also obesity nutrition. Is that what the majority of people do? Or you're not? Right?
I don't know what the depth of the do. So here's the thing, right? So I don't know how many people are in this group, right? Let's say 40-ish people. You have, let's say, 4 articles. So what's the likelihood of, each article aligning to at least one person that is sort of interest? There's a good chance you'll get articles that you will go down about. So that's always a possibility as well. You read all these articles, you're like, really?
And so not to belabor the point, but
Yeah.
just going on the example of obesity, one could choose to do obesity, but just look at different indicators and measures and so forth. Different program, but still, just modifying the existing program.
Yeah. So you can borrow the design. So if you love obesity, that's your thing. And the whole world of public health for you is about obesity prevention. And none of the articles are about obesity. There's still something from those articles you could take and apply towards looking at obesity. So if there was another thing that way.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be like the program design. So there's a similar study design, but what I'm hearing is that maybe the article that you're tweaking has a little bit of background section and the problem of like you say like I really want to address obesity as well.
And just for the purposes of making it clear to the evaluator, should we be, putting a sentence in our background that we are taking or borrowing from this particular study and applying it to this so that it's clear to the evaluator?
Yes. That is always smart when you're writing anything in human rights. And I'll circle back to your comment in just a minute. Yes.
I remember hearing somewhere along the way that your program could not be in the same area as your 211 project.
It can be in the same area, but you don't want to rewrite your 211 project. And I know at some point somebody's going to ask me a follow-up question about, well, how similar, how dissimilar. Yes. I'm going to tell you this. If you have any doubts about whether it's too similar, err on the side of making it more different. Okay. So that's the answer to all the questions that will come about how close can I make it to 211? What can I get away with? I'm going to tell you, err on the side of staying far away if you have any doubt. Let me see. So specific to 211, as you develop your program, go back to the basics about having a good, compelling problem statement, defining your populations, your settings, and all that kind of stuff. Use some kind of theory or framework. It could be pre-seed, it could be anything you want. It could be CRT, if you can figure out a way to use it. Okay, and actually use it. This is one of the places where people kind of make a big mistake. They give lip service. They say, in the study, we're going to use, I don't know, social learning theory. And social learning theory has all these different things, right? Observational learning, vicarious learning, and then self-efficacy. That's social learning theory. Bandura is like awesome. Okay. Then as you design the intervention, there's like nothing about observational vicarious learning. There's nothing about self-efficacy. So you just kind of gave it lip service in 2 sentences, and then the rest of your program is about removing barriers to, I don't know, access through monetary rewards or something like that. See, you want your theory to align with your intervention. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. So don't just give it lip service. As you go back and revisit and edit your work, you want to go back and say, well, I talked about this theory, but I actually use it in my variables, my objectives, that kind of thing. You don't have to use every single thing, right? Like social learning theory is this giant list of 80 billion things that right? You don't have to use all 80 billion things. Point out like 3 things from social learning theory that you're going to focus on, and then make it happen across the entire intervention. And as you write objectives, make them smart. If you don't remember what a smart objective is, now's a good time to refresh your memory. Okay. Okay. When you do your study design, describe it very clearly. If you need to use X's and O's, go ahead and use X's and O's. Okay. Sometimes what happens that's really confusing is you'll spend one section writing about your intervention group, and then at some point, you're like, oh, I need to have a comparison group, and that comparison group shows up 3 pages later, buried in one sentence. Right? You don't want people searching for all that stuff. So put everything all in one place. We're going to use a pre-post design with randomization of this and that, kind of thing, right? Make it clear. When you guys look at study design, did you do Campbell and Stanley, X's and O's, O's being observation, X means intervention? Yes, you can do something like that. You don't have to. You don't have to. You can write it in a way where the picture is clear, but if you worry about your ability to write, sometimes the picture might not. Picture things that have to fit into the baseline. No appendices. If you put an appendix in, you spend an hour putting that in, know that that will not be read. So it's wasted effort. No appendix. Okay. So in this case, here's a couple examples, right? 1 or 2 sentences. Our study design is based on one intervention group that includes a baseline, a 3-month intervention, and a post-intervention assessment. There's no comparison group. So if you have the sentence in your mind, you can show a 0, an X, and a 0, and that's it. Right? This one has a randomized trial. Students randomized to either control or intervention. They receive a pre-test, then receive a placebo, and then a post-test. Right? So here you got 2 lines, R, O, X, O, and then the second line, R, O, O. Right? You don't have to do that, but if you wrote something like this, people could imagine it pretty quickly. Okay? So try to write in a way that communicates. Is that a hint? Okay. And here's the thing, you all know how to do this. So I can sense a little nervousness here, but you all know this. Okay, so. Okay. And again, consistency, this is what I mentioned before. Okay, especially between theory and measures and all that good stuff. Okay, budget. Broad categories. Do not go crazy with a line item budget. The budget should probably be about a paragraph or so. Okay, have big categories like personnel, incentives, but don't do stuff like, oh, we're going to budget $100 for pens and $25 for Xeroxing, that kind of stuff. You only have maybe a paragraph or so, maybe 2 paragraphs for your budget, but you should think about important needs. So here's something like, well, we're going to do a major intervention, and part of what we're going to do is we're going to pay teachers for 3 days of training. That's kind of an important component. So then you want to think about how you want to talk about the budget for 3 days of training. And again, it's not kind of big categories like in the training we're going to serve coffee, and coffee's going to cost 25 cents per person. But it's really, we budget $1,500 for training for 800 teachers for 3 days.
Business paragraphs on the company development and activate that.
You don't need a table. You could have a table, but a paragraph will suffice. Yes?
So we're not have to justify where we got those estimates from.
No, they just have to be reasonable. So if you say we're going to budget $1 million for 3 days of training, that just sounds wrong, right? Or if you say we're going to expect teachers to donate 6 months of their time, and we're going to pay them 30 cents. You know, it has to be roughly reasonable. Okay. All right. Any kind of big picture questions about the intervention and all that kind of stuff? So what I would suggest that all of you do is budget somewhere between 4 to 6 hours to edit. Right? So you're going to get the exam, you're going to get a few days, and you think of this exam as a marathon. It's not a sprint. Right? If you spend all of Friday night working until 3 a.m. in the morning, burn yourself out. That is not a good strategy. So budget your time, budget in time to just chill out, have dinner, maybe go for a run or something. I know it sounds hard, I know it sounds impossible, okay? But you do not want to sprint the entire weekend, okay? So my advice is to budget in some chill out time, some time to do some self-care, okay? Take a hot bath, whatever it is that you have, okay? The exam is going to be due on May 1, and May 1. I think it's due at noon. Do not turn it in at noon. Okay, if it's late by a minute, that can be a failure. You do not want your internet to go down 5 minutes before, and then you're like, oh my gosh, what is going on? My life is ruined. Turn it in, I would suggest 2 hours early. I would also suggest that you budget in, like, 4 to 6 hours just in time. Okay? So that means that you should be done with your entire exam early in the day on Sunday, and then give yourself the latter part of Sunday, maybe Monday morning, depending on what your schedule's like, to edit this sucker. Okay? And make sure, does it make sense that I follow all the directions? One tip for editing, I'll get to your question in a second, is to print it out in a different font. So let's say you write everything out in Arial 12, print it out in like Palatino 10. Because what's going to happen is all the pages and all those letters and things are going to shift around. It's going to force your eyes to see your work in a different way. And you might catch things that you didn't see using the standard font. Okay? Also, read it out loud. If you're not maybe a good writer, not all of us are, then you could just read it to yourself. Does it make sense when I hear it in my ears? Okay? And that will also help me catch a few things. Now you have a question.
Yeah, so I mean, anything, but like, what if like, there's some people who are here and hierarchy,
Sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah. If it's a major emergency like that, then you should just contact Jennifer ASAP and just let her know. For stuff like that, like if you're in the ER, absolutely limit accommodations for stuff like that. But you know, if it's like paper and yes. The way. Just make it make sense.
We've gotten tips from students as to the areas of biggest pitfalls of big towns and
Yeah, so let me go, see if I can go to the beginning. So I tried to give you essentially some of the big tips, right? Budget your time wisely. Get your crew to accommodate your time. So if you have family things that you're obligated to do, work schedules that you're obligated to, get those people to help you out by giving you the gift of time. And maybe the gift of running errands for you, right? So maybe if somebody can make you dinner, that'd be great, you know? Those kinds of things, or maybe plan to cook ahead of time and have stuff frozen and ready in the freezer, you know? Try to think ahead of time about things that will make your life easier in that way. Okay. I would suggest turning off your phone and just telling everybody, I'm just going to be off the phone during this period if you really have an emergency that you knock on the door or something like that. Because as you know, everybody wants you, and it's so easy with phones to have their emergencies be your emergencies. And I would just tell people, if you have an emergency, it's your emergency. Next weekend, sure, but this weekend, okay, be a little selfish. As I mentioned, set aside time to edit. This is where I think a lot of people get in trouble because they're just so rushing. They're writing until like 3 minutes before the exam. And they're just rushing. And then when they're done, it's clear there's been zero edit time to edit and look it over. And so remember, over the course of several days, your ideas will change. That's kind of natural as you write. So if you don't give yourself time to just kind of catch things and catch the evolution of your thinking, you're doing yourself a disservice. So I would really highly do that. Now, I want to say a couple other things. Okay. Put yourself in our shoes, those of your professors. Okay. So what sometimes happens is people will turn in a wall of text. Okay, do you want to read a wall of text? No paragraph, no white space, it's all text, no formatting, right? And then people will use things like acronyms because they're like, oh, I'm out of space. I'll just turn everything into an acronym. As a way to cheat on the space issues. Okay. You don't have to add this up. Okay, don't do that. Remember, we have to read all these things. Right? Some of us have aching eyes. Okay? So if you make it hard to read, how do you think people are going to kind of feel, kind of wise when they're looking at this thing and they're kind of like, okay, this is the 15th exam I read. This one is a complete wall of text. There's acronyms that were defined 3 times. This one page has 20 acronyms on it. I can't make heads or tails of it. I have to flip back 5 pages to figure out what all these acronyms are. What kind of disposition do you think they're going to be? This is also true for things like writing research papers or writing grants. So get into the habit of trying to write so that it's easy for your readers to just kind of pick up stuff. As you write, I'll tell you another thing. As a tip, we as human beings, we our eyes will easily see the first sentence of a paragraph and the last sentence of a paragraph. Everything in the middle of a paragraph is sometimes gloss over. So if you want to highlight something, you can obviously do things like boldface or outside. Another thing is to make sure that important things are at the beginning of the paragraph and at the end of the paragraph. Use character terms. Use a tab, to indicate there's a new margin, a new index for a new paragraph.
So something that reminding us to remember in this class, in class, we don't really do this. It's a lot more compelling than people have facts and data that is to kind of focus on this. Is that still okay, or should we just kind of stick to
211 is a safe approach. So, you want to hear my bias? I hate how they teach you what I teach a class I'm a better at it. So I hate how they teach you what. But when you safe about it, it's the way it goes. You don't need an abstract.
Is it 10 pages for the whole thing, or is it 7
I think it's 12 pages total and plus one more page for references. It'll be on the instruction sheet.
Does it have to be 10, or?
What do you think the answer is? No. It's roughly 10, right? It's 12 pages total, and I said the critique is about 2 pages, so the program is about 10 pages, but you have some wiggle room.
So the article is within.
So I've heard of people doing kind of extensive layout before they get an exam, like framing a couple of different potential programs. I'm wondering if you can speak to the utility of that.
Sure. Well, so if it helps you to essentially do some dry runs, right? So I'm going to get an art. I'm just going to pick an art. I'm going to go to some journal, pick an article. I'm going to critique it. I'm going to create an intervention based on it ahead of time. Yeah, go crazy. That's great. It's good practice. What I would do is do that, cut and paste, when you did, because you're not. The chances of you getting an article that you pick a priority is probably very small. Right? So I would not cut and paste. And if you do, don't overcome. Right? But it's good practice to do it. So your mind is kind of there. You get a feel for maybe a few things that you're still struggling with, and you can do some more practice and get some help on. You're like, oh, this was easier than I thought. And this part I really struggled. I didn't realize I've forgotten so much. So doing a practice thing like that isn't a bad idea. But again, I wouldn't write stuff and then anticipate cutting and pasting, putting it on. That's not a really strong strategy.
But like researching a particular population and anticipating that you might design an intervention on.
Yeah. So if you are committed to working with, say, I don't know, Cambodian kids, right? So if that's your thing, and you have all those articles ready, or if you want to get some new material, go ahead, organize that. Like right now, you're like, I really want to work with Cambodian youth. My intervention, Hell or High Water, is going to be about Cambodian youth. I'm going to get all baselines ready. That's fine. Yeah. So there's a handling that. The references are a separate page, a different page.
So it's only one page of references, right? So if we have a lot more references, we just cut it off.
You have to be very selective. And this is where the editing will pay off as well. Because at some point you're going to be like, I'm over the page limit, and what am I going to do? And if you give yourself some time to edit, then that'll give you an opportunity to kind of fuss with all that. Yeah, having a hypothesis, you can have them. You're not mandated to have them. You should be clear what the research is about them. So our program is trying to reduce, I don't know, infant mortality rates, that kind of thing. And as part of it, we believe that social learning is important, or an anti-racism program is important. We hypothesize that an anti-racism program will reduce stress amongst moms. We'll measure stress this way. We measure racism that way. We anticipate these numbers of women to participate. Yes.
So we can analysis of the diverse race by representation.
It's going to be on your thing. I don't know off the top of my head.
So can you use an evidence-based program that is already out there and do that? Obviously, you can't do it. You can't just copy or. I guess what I'm trying to say is, can you use an evidence-based program that's already out there, or does this have to be like an innovative
So it's not.
type of program? Because for too long we were told that you can use evidence-based, but you have to still. So you can just.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You probably don't want to just create something new. You don't have a lot of time.
Yeah, I was just.
And when you're creating stuff that's new, it's always way harder.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I don't know, it seemed like in looking at some review materials from years past, there was mention of creating an innovative program. So that's not part of this as an innovative program. It's just drawing something that's existing to something new. And that's your innovation is a new population or just adding to an existing program in some way.
Innovation is one of those words like crazy. Right? So what's innovative and beautiful to one person is maybe not to another person kind of thing. Yeah.
Would you like to include the statements, some topic from each of the $100 classification?
Say again?
In the past, they talked about having to include a statement and then what we thought this regulation.
Oh. Yeah. Well, okay. So you might have some material that, for example, from a stats class, to analyze the data, we'll do regression or something. You could put in parentheses like stats.
Are you required to?
Okay.
Are you required to have components in each of the classification, or is that optional?
Well, you are required.
Okay.
What's the gray zone is whether you're required to document it.
Oh, okay.
If you want it to be saved, then I would document it. Okay. If you didn't document it, you might be able to get away with it. And if you want to just be safe about it, just put EHS, 100, and friends. Everything like that.
So do you have that in each of our core classes?
You would be smart to do that. Yes.
So for 211, we had an analysis question.
Okay.
So how, I don't know, how all do you have to look at? Because I know I specialize in that kind of data, and some people in the leadership kind of use it, they were strong in that section, and so
Sure.
they were able to carry more of the track.
Yeah. Okay, so, right. I would try your best to put in some statistical direction in your right? So if you say, we have binary data and we will analyze it using a statistical regression. We are not expecting you to be statisticians. This is one of those areas where if you kind of really are way off on it, I think most of the time people will give you a pass at everything else. Okay. So try your best and try to make it work.
Can you stick it all to the enemy portion?
away.
The monitoring and evaluation and how extensive process about, the outcomes about, how much that should.
You should, well, so you should have all of those things there to show that you thought about it in the process. How much, there's no answer. I can't answer questions about how much of anything I should put in because it's really going to depend on the nature of the intervention. If, for example, your project is all CBPR, CBPR places a heavy emphasis on process. So therefore, it makes sense to have some good detail on process for a CBPR project. If you had some other project that didn't use CBPR and was maybe using some other kind of perspective, then process should be there, but it may not play as a prominent role as a CBPR project. Okay? So all those things should be there, but how much just really depends on the nature of it.
Thanks for letting me guys do annual citation. Is it longer?
No. So just pick one method and be consistent.
It says it's
Employees fail
You are not required to create a logic model. But remember what a logic model is. It's a communication tool that helps you think about your project and may also be useful to help other people quickly assimilate the project as well. So use whatever tools you need to communicate your ideas. You're not required to do one, but if it helps you, it might be worth it.
So we have a class in like 13, or
Okay.
1:30.
All right. We'll be out.
Alright, we have 5 minutes.
All right. All right. So I am confident that you will all do well. I know I'm a little flip up here and how I'm answering the question. I'm not trying to be evasive. I've been on the committee for several years, showing it this year. I'm trying to give you guys the big picture pitfalls, which is really consistency, giving yourself some time to edit. Don't rush it. Take your time, be measured, and get things to make your life easy, like microwavable dinners, that kind of thing. All right? And if you do all that, you'll be fine. All right. Well, good luck. And